Welcome back to Raising Families. It's been a long time since I've been here, but I'm really excited to come back and have a show on what the Surgeon General has referred to as an epidemic. And some of you parents maybe have heard about this and some have not. This is a show specifically for parents because we want to educate you about the newest threat to our young people and tell you some of the details so you get to know about that. One of the reasons I haven't been on the show recently is because I'm now working exclusively with tobacco and nicotine issues, both as an enforcement person and as somebody who helps boards of health figure out the best policies to respond to developing trends with our youth, and also to do enforcement and go in stores, for example, and make sure that they're selling the right products for the right price and they're not doing anything illegal, and bring in young people in to test whether or not the store owners are selling to minors or their staff are selling to minors. So today I'm excited to be here to tell you about this, but first I'm going to introduce you to Matt Mitchell, who is the program manager for the new, well, not new, it's has been known as the Office of Prevention, but there's been a name change and a little bit of a redesign. So Matt is going to talk to you about some pieces of this, and I'm going to talk to you about some others. So just to get started, as I just said, the Surgeon General has referred to the new problem of vaping as an epidemic, and we'll tell you, both of us will tell you a little bit about why that is. First of all, I'm going to show you what one of those devices is. This is called a Juuls, and for some parents and young people, if you were to say electronic cigarettes, people would not know what you're talking about. These have become so popular that they are often referred to as the activity. So it is now called juuling among young people. This is, it actually is an electronic cigarette, but it's the newest version of an electronic cigarette. And this is what it looks like. Young people have been known to be using this in their computers. And as you can see, it looks like a USB drive. So we want parents to be able to see this and understand what it is should they find something like this in their children's belongings. So for a long time, even teachers were just thinking that this was a USB drive and not questioning it, but it's actually an electronic cigarette. Another interesting and scary thing that I want to show you is that this operates by using a pod. This is called a pod. And a pod has the equivalent of an entire pack of cigarettes in terms of nicotine in this one little pod. And you can see how tiny it is. So what's concerning about that is that nicotine is actually the drug that is the addictive part of a cigarette or tobacco. The tobacco has its own chemical reaction and so on, but the real scary addictive part is the nicotine. And in that one little pod, as I said, it's equivalent to a whole pack of cigarettes. Now, one of the reasons that this is so scary is that if you were to give a pack of cigarettes to a young person, or they were picking this up for the first time, they would have a very difficult time inhaling the harshness of the tobacco. And they would they would be feeling the taking it out of the pack. They would be feeling the holding it and smoking it that way. With this, the problem is that there is something like 220 puffs in this one little vial of nicotine. And most young people are puffing away on this kind of compulsively as the addiction gets further along, and they don't realize how much they're taking in. So you can imagine going from being nicotine-free to smoking a pack of nicotine, and some young people are smoking them in less than a day. So this is very frightening, and we want you to see what this looks like. Okay, so that's one. Now another issue is that some of the other copycat companies are making similar devices. This one was made from blue, and I actually bought this in a store for $1, the beginner kit. And it was a dollar because Blue had a promotional reduced price. And you can't get that now, but for a little while you could. And so, as I said, I paid $1, and you can see that it looks very much like the Juuls, but it's much cheaper. For young people to buy one of these, they usually cost between $15.99 and $25.99. So it's not an easy thing for many young people to get, but somehow they're managing to get it. And these pods, as some of you may know, we've raised the taxes in Massachusetts to make cigarettes very expensive. And that is it's one of the strategies that we hope will keep nicotine out of the hands of young people. However, now the cheapest pack of cigarettes you can get right now is about $9 something with taxes. These pods, you can get 4 of them for about $12. So you can see how much of a reduced cost that is for young people. And we hear stories sometimes of, for example, a parent in this was Melrose, not Somerville, but her son bought a credit card as a gift card, with a credit card, bought a gift card, and then took an Uber to a vape store to buy these. So young people are getting them, and we want you to know what they are so that if you see them, you understand. Now, I'll just tell you briefly a little bit about one other aspect of this. So these pods are already full of the liquid nicotine. Here's the one that goes in the blue. As you can see, it's very similar to the other ones. It goes in the blue. But these are what we call liquid vape. And liquid vape goes into, not these, although there are YouTube videos that shows you how to put them into there, but these go into some other kinds of electronic cigarettes, again, called vaping devices. Just quickly before we go on to Matt and ask some questions, I wanted to show you that there are several different kinds of vape products. But again, the one that is most significant right now is this Juul. And we have available now flyers like this, that's, as you can see, is called Vaping, and it talks a lot about what a parent can do to make sure that they're helping their young person to understand the dangers of this. Because one of the things that we find when we ask young people if they know what's in a vape, they often say, yeah, it's water and flavor. And we know that that's completely not true. There's no water in a vape. There is only the chemicals that are turning into, actually, vaping is a misnomer because the chemical is actually turning into an aerosol. And you can imagine inhaling an aerosol and how unhealthy that would be. So this is specifically a flyer for parents. And you can get these from either Matt or I in the Office of Prevention. Our website is on this, how to reach us is on the city website. And here's another one that we have available. This is called Nicotine Addiction, the new face of nicotine addiction. Because actually we've done a really, really good job of lowering the rates of young people who begin smoking. And even many adults have quit smoking. But big tobacco and big vaping industries are now pushing these products as a way, basically we think, as a way to get new lifelong addicted smokers. And they're not smoking traditional cigarettes, but they're smoking these. And we don't know yet what the harms will be of these long term, just like we didn't know that with cigarettes. So we really want to get the message out. Again, you can get these flyers and these brochures from our office. We really encourage you to do that and learn as much as you can. And we also have them in Spanish, so we have them available in Spanish. Okay, so I gave you a whole mouthful right now, but let's turn to Matt. Let me just say this before we do. Some people have asked, will vaping be part of what's used for marijuana as we become more, marijuana becomes more accessible. So do you want to talk a little bit about that, Matt?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So thank you again for inviting me on. We've been talking about doing this for a little bit, and I'm glad
Yeah.
it's actually happening. So yeah, to get back to, with e-cigarettes and marijuana particularly, we're seeing it's called dabbing is the term that we're seeing, where individuals are now able to replace some of the nicotine salts liquid that is in the products for nicotine-based solutions with THC or CBD-based solutions. And for those who are not familiar with either of those, CBD is the non-psychoactive part of the marijuana plant. It's anecdotally known to provide some pain relief, but there still needs to be some more research done on that. But for THC, that's the main high component. So that's where individuals may be smoking it for the hope to kind of detach from reality, or maybe to relieve some stress as well.
Interesting. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I think for some parents, and certainly me before I got involved in all of this, I had no idea that there was like basically liquid marijuana, which is what THC is in many ways, right?
Yeah, I think it's tough because the new forms of heatable devices, because they're not combustible, they're heated, and there's very little smoke, and there's very little flavor or smell to it. I shouldn't say flavor. There's very little smell to it, so a lot of parents aren't even quite aware that it's happening even in front of them, or teachers, as we've seen or heard about in schools, where kids are vaping in the classroom and parents or teachers have no idea that it's going on, because they either blow it into their hoodie, or there's just so minimal amount of smoke that the teacher can't catch every single moment that it's going on. So, it's an adapting, the cigarette companies and the large e-cigarette companies are adapting to some of the things that they've been known to be negative for, whether it's the smell, or it's the, mostly the smell, or the flavor itself. They're trying to find cooler, sleeker ways to get a product into people's hands and create lifelong customers, like you were saying.
Right. I was just thinking as you were talking too that some of these we've found that they can even it's being pushed in a way to kind of make your jewel your own by decorating it and putting little sleeves on it. It's really a whole market, and it's geared towards young people. There's no question about it.
And that's certainly our concern. We've learned a lot of lessons from the tobacco industry, and kind of how it's well documented that they've targeted youth and tried to advertise to youth by whether that be younger models in their ads, or selling it as a cool, hip thing to do. And I think as we've seen it shift over the years, where cigarette use has been going down, we saw a 6% increase in high school student usage in the last 2 years, from 2016 to 2018. It went from about 6% to 13%, or 7%, I'm sorry, to 13%. So that's a pretty big jump, almost double what we're seeing. And that was a little bit before the epidemic kind of really took hold. And we see now the FDA has been doing a lot around trying to crack down on it, increasing people's awareness about what's in vapes and in Juuls, and also some policies, things that they can take steps to address. And I know for here in Somerville, we recently, back in December, where the Board of Health passed an initiative or a policy to restrict the sale of e-cigarettes and their corresponding flavors to 21 plus only stores, to remove the access and to remove the exposure that youth could potentially have to the products.
Right. And even though this is a show on vaping, you just mentioned something that that triggered something that I tell people about too. As Matt said, the Board of Health in Somerville, which is a very progressive and on-target Board of Health, really watching out for the health of the community. Which isn't always the case. Sometimes boards of health struggle a lot with whether or not, or how much rather, to put the health of the community above business and so on. And Somerville is almost like fearless when it comes to that. They are determined that the health of the community is the most important thing. So along with all vape products and vape devices being sent to the adult-only tobacco retail stores, of which there are only a couple at this point in Somerville. And let me just define those stores. An adult-only retail store means that a young person has to be 21 to even step over the threshold. As one of the enforcement officers, if they step over even without buying a product, I can write them a ticket because they have essentially broken the law. But anyway, back to the first issue. So they also decided to restrict menthol products to those stores as well. That means that as of April 1st, you will not be able to go into a convenience store or a gas station and buy menthol cigarettes or menthol chewing tobacco or anything menthol. And the reason for that, people ask me a lot what the reason is, and I think it's quite amazing. One of the reasons is that those products have been almost exclusively marketed to people of color. That's one reason. In fact, if you have a chance, there is a 15-minute YouTube video called Black Lives, Black Lungs that will really open your eyes to the insidiousness of the marketing that has been done in that regard. But also, menthol masks the harshness of the tobacco so that you can actually, one can actually breathe deeper and get more addicted because the menthol is kind of not allowing you to have as much of an irritation as you would from just smoking regular tobacco flavored products. So again, those products will be out of our local stores. And the reason for that is because young people go into those stores frequently and we don't want them to see it because there's some research that shows that the more they see it, the more likely they are to want to try it.
And to speak to that, it's going beyond just menthol too, and it's including wintergreen and mint.
Yes.
The reason why is that was like a gap when we had restricted the other flavors, because there are no flavored tobacco can be purchased in a City of Somerville convenience store or gas station or anywhere that's open to anyone under the age of 21. But there were these exceptions at the time that were left out, and I think there were some pretty important ones to address that were not included in the original one, and menthol being the number one that most people are probably most familiar with, particularly cigarette smokers. And I think this was just a way to kind of reconcile it all so that, these products that, if you're an adult and you're choosing to smoke, that's your prerogative, that's your right. Not trying to take away that in any way, shape, or form. But convenience stores or anywhere that's open to individuals under the age of 21, we wanted to make sure that, we're decreasing as much exposure. In a world that's full of exposure to a lot of different things, we're trying to do our part.
Right. And just to go along with that, I want to reiterate, because sometimes people will say, they get very irritated and say, how can you ban a legal product? So they have not been banned. They are legal products. That continues to be true. And you can buy them in these adult-only retail stores, but it's just a matter of keeping them away from the hands of young people as much as we can. And let's see what else. Can you think of anything else we haven't said yet that we should say?
Yeah, I mean, I think for at least for the country or nationally, we're seeing the FDA is taking this very seriously and are looking at all possible things to address around e-cigarettes and also tobacco in general. And so, the FDA commissioner who had just resigned, who will be resigning in a month, unfortunately, he's been doing a lot of good work, was looking to ban menthol cigarettes completely in the United States. So I would assume that would continue on with the new commissioner coming in. But he also went as far to meet with all of these e-cigarette companies, including Juul, and talk about their advertising techniques. I think there was a raid on Juul headquarters a couple months ago to look at the marketing and kind of how they early on started to target and are advertised to youth. And you'll see now they've shifted their campaign from younger individuals in their ads to ex-smokers who are looking to stop smoking and have used Juul as a way to kind of smoking cessation. But also, the FDA have also really cracked down on internet sales, where before you could go on any of these websites, buy it, put it in your cart, use one of those gift cards that you referenced earlier, have it sent anywhere, and you got your product. And now there's a lot more safeguards. You have to put your age in, you have to create an account, there has to be all these other things, which is a start. Not to say that's going to be the end all be all, but I think it's nice to see the FDA taking the steps that they need to take, and they got a long road ahead of them. You know, they're fighting up against big companies with big money and a lot of leverage. But I think we are trying to glean from some of the stuff that they're doing on a local level. You know, we can control time, place, and manner. So, you know, we try to do what we can in the best interest of the residents, especially youth.
You reminded me of two more things that I want to say. One is that I went to a conference on Friday where all of us in this field are trying to learn just as much as we possibly can, because this kind of came on the scene very suddenly. We frankly were not prepared for this.
Oh, yeah.
You know, those of us doing this work. And so we're learning as much as we can. And the Attorney General was speaking at that workshop. And I won't get into all the details because we're at the end of our show, but she's also doing a lot of work in her office to crack down on this. So two very important things I want to say, I think, and then Matt, you can finish up if you have any last thing to say.
Sure.
So these, as we said, are liquid vape. And we want to make sure that parents understand too how dangerous these products are without getting everybody in a complete panic. But just to know that, you know, you've heard information about that pods, those little Tide pods, children were eating them, and how you have to be really careful to keep them away from children.
Sure.
Same with these. 2 teaspoons of a vape juice has been known to kill a small child.
Wow.
So that's, a doctor was talking about that last night at a vape panel that I went to. So you want, if you are an adult and you're using these products or you find them in your house, please be very cognizant of how dangerous they are.
And just one thing to add to that, there was a report. Well, one big thing is that these aren't regulated by the FDA, any of these things.
Yes.
So people really aren't sure what's in the product. There's not ingredients labels on the products. They're not required to. So there was actually a report yesterday, I think it was from the Daily Mail, that talked about how a woman had an allergic reaction to one of the one of the vapor liquids, because they weren't sure what was in it, and they got all hives and everything all over their body. So, you know, it's important to know that if you are choosing to use these products, do your research, look into it a little bit more.
Right.
You can find it online, but it's not going to be right on the bottle.
Right. We've found that the bottles are often very deceptive. So just a couple of really quick things. One is that there was a nurse last night talking about addiction in young people and signs to look for, because how many parents would think that their child is suddenly addicted to nicotine if they can't sit still and they can't stay in a class? The doctor gave one example of a young person who couldn't sleep through the night because they had to wake up. They kept the jewels under their pillow so that they could wake up and have a puff because they couldn't get through the night. So those are signs that we want to encourage to look for. You know, if suddenly somebody who's very calm is now suddenly jittery a lot of the time, you know, you want to be thinking about the possibility of this.
And there are some new initiatives coming out
Yes.
to address that. I know the Truth Initiative has come out with a text line for youth to reach out at any time they feel like they need to.
Right.
Without their parent, you know, they can just do it on their own. And I think the one other thing is that the doctors and, you know, the medical professionals weren't prepared for this. So
Exactly.
they're in the process of developing treatment programs that are most effective. So
Right.
one thing I would say is avoid using like gum or, you know, Nicorette or anything like that for youth, because those are really designed for adults, not
Right.
for youth
Right.
now.
And we have only 2 minutes left, so I'm going to talk really quick. So if you know, there is a little bit of research that shows that maybe these can help somebody who is trying to get off tobacco. And what we say about that is, if it's helping and you really stop the tobacco, like stop smoking and just use this, it's possible that it can help you to quit.
Yep.
However, what we also see is that often people get addicted to both. So if you're going to use that to quit smoking, then really put the cigarettes and everything down and just use that, and then go gradually down on the nicotine.
And
one last thing that I'll say, and then I want Matt to say his ending.
Go for it.
But the Surgeon General did recently, or was it the FDA? Somebody made a rule that these must be in child-proof caps. So they are in child-proof caps, although this is an old one. That's not. So that's a little bit of a safeguard. Matt, we've got about 1 minute.
All right. No, I think the last message would be, you know, the FDA for a long time were talking about it being a cessation tool for adults. And I think the best way to put it is the now former commissioner said, you know, we're not going to allow that to override creating new individuals or new users and having them addicted to nicotine.
Yeah.
So while it has been proven to be good for adults who had been smoking, we're also seeing that youth are using e-cigarettes who were not previously smoking
Right.
in any
And who
form
wouldn't
and are now
have smoked.
becoming smokers.
Right,
So they're not going to allow that to be the case.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you very much for letting us come on and tell you about all this. And as I said, we both work for the Office of Prevention, and please feel free at any point to give us a call and ask us about more, or ask us to come and do presentations at your PTO, your school, or anything. And there's lots of other people who are working with us, people who are trained to come and do presentations. We have lawyers that work with us, and there are legal issues. So we've told you a whole lot, and there's a whole lot more to tell, actually, but can digest that for now. Thank you.